All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining everybody. This is our festive showcase, and this is Tiffany Bromfield. A couple things before we get started. I just want to point out that since it's a webinar format, there's still ways to be engaged. So there's a chat function, there's an anonymous Q&A box, and there's also a raise hand function if you choose to unmute. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you if you choose to participate that way. So I'd like to introduce our speaker today. She's from the Neokuho region. Tiffany Bromfield currently serves as the Associate Director for Residence Life at SUNY Buffalo State University, overseeing residence education, recruitment, selection, and training of students and professional staff, and serving on various campus committees. Tiffany takes an inclusive approach to supervising and supporting her team. She is currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Buffalo, where she plans to research Black women resident assistants' experiences and how they articulate feelings of mattering and career readiness through residence life employment. She currently serves as the Regional Affiliates Director at Akuoi and has served on the executive board for Neokuho and the Southeast Association of Colleges and University Housing Officers. And in her free time, which doesn't sound like you have much of, she enjoys volunteering with her sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority sisters, and traveling. So at this time, I'll kick it over to Tiffany.
Well, hi everyone. This is my first time giving it in a webinar format, so I expected to see like all the boxes pop up of people, which I don't see. So hopefully, if you all have questions or things, feel free to raise your hand or put things in the chat. I will occasionally, in doing this presentation, I need to share my screen. I just realized I hadn't shared it. Sorry, y'all. So I will occasionally give some opportunities to kind of raise hands if folks have questions and things of that nature. And you can just unmute or however this works. Again, I've never done a webinar format, so this is new for me, but I'm really excited to be here. So once again, Tiffany Bromfield, she, her, his pronouns. I currently serve as the Associate Director for Residence Life at SUNY Buffalo State. I'm also ABD, so all but dissertation, which is a big step in this process, and I'm excited to be here with y'all today. So I'm gonna go ahead and kick the presentation off. If I can get it to work. There we go. So here's kind of the run of the things of what we'll discuss today. Again, I say it's short in theory because a lot of it for me is more about how we engage with the staff. And I don't necessarily think that when it comes to supervision, particularly supervising of this up and coming generation, it is not as complicated or challenging as folks think it is, more so than it's just higher education as a system and a process, and how we've known to understand supervision isn't necessarily leaning towards developmental in nature, while depending on the type of institution you work at, the size of institution you're at, the amount of resources your institution has to offer, it may be easier from some versus others. But this is also what it is to work in a multi-generational workplace when you're engaging with staff and students, faculty, all of those folks who range across the generations. So today I'm going to start off with a brief introduction, tell you all some things about myself so you have an understanding about the work I do. I'll talk more about multi-generational workplaces and kind of common threads between those generations. Now, again, there are those really interesting outliers, but the research lists these common things around these generations. Then I'll talk about Stanford University. They did a study a few years ago to talk about kind of some of the things that Gen Z expects in the workplace, because for a lot of Gen Z coming into the workforce during COVID and post-COVID, the standard work norms and things that we know to exist have changed. And then I do a little bit around leadership, management, and supervision, and how those three things differ and what that looks like. I'll talk about the responsibilities you have as a supervisor. I'll give you some points of consideration. I'll offer the strategies that I use, and then give you kind of some of the advice, and then I'll have an opportunity for questions and information to be able to connect with me. So a little bit about myself. As she mentioned in my introduction of all the things that kind of make up who I am as a person, I am currently preparing to do a weightlifting competition in November, which I'm super excited about. It was a hobby that I kind of picked up in my doctoral program as like a way to kind of balance my health and wellness, because I was a competitive athlete for so long. And it's been fun. So I'm excited to compete in November and enjoy all of the things that come with weightlifting. Jamaria Valentine, is that a high five or a question? Because these things have changed, so I'm not sure. Oh, it's a high five. Okay, great. So I am a competitive weightlifter. I am a first generation American. So my parents came to the United States from Jamaica in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. So that has a spectrum of influence around how I see the world and engage in higher education, as we know with our system. But I also work at a campus currently where a vast majority of my students are coming from families and they are children of immigrants. And a lot of my students are immigrants themselves. So that offers an interesting perspective in how they engage with the system of higher education. I was born in the Bronx, New York. I was raised in New Haven, Connecticut. That makes a big part of who I am because I was educated in a public school system. And I like to tell folks that public education is the education that is for everyone, or at least it's supposed to be. So it is important that those systems are equitable. This webinar is for a cool Y. I've been an active member in a cool Y. I always, at the conferences, take the picture at the bottom you see in the right-hand corner where I put the I in a cool Y. And I have been attending the annual conference every year now, pretty much since I've been in the field. I consider it my version of a family reunion because that's when I really have the time that I'm engaging with folks and getting poured into for my own professional development and growth. And I was the former Black Professionals Network co-chair. So that also is a part of my leadership journey in developing and becoming the professional that I am today. And a lot of that is due in part to my development within a cool Y. I've worked at a range of institutions, large public, regional, smalls, and I did work at one private institution at NYU. But again, I try to make sure that I seek out institutions where their educational mission is around elevating and moving folks up, particularly folks of color or underserved populations, moving them up through the socioeconomic status from where they start and where they finish. And then my education, I got my bachelor's degree at Jacksonville University in Jacksonville, Florida. Small private school where I was a track and field athlete for all 4 years. I went on to get my master's at the University of North Texas, Go Mean Green. I worked there while I completed my master's full time, and now I'm a part-time doctoral student at the University at Buffalo, where I'm currently in the dissertation proposal phase. I'm getting ready to turn in my proposal on Friday, where I'm going to propose a study around Black female resident assistants and how they articulate their feelings of mattering and career readiness. So hope and send all the love there because writing this proposal has definitely taken a lot more out of me. Not that I anticipated, but I didn't think that I could write to this ability. So it's been an interesting stretch for me as a person. So on to the good stuff. Right now in our field, we essentially have, for the most part, 4 generations of folks who are in our workforce. We have baby boomers, we have Gen X, we have millennials, and then we have Gen Z. You'll see on the sides of kind of the presentation where I highlight some of the qualities of those folks. I, as a millennial, will agree with all of those things. I think my generation of all the generations really cares about those milestones and markers and trying to do all the things and be all the things. I've supervised the baby boomers before, so I do think those things proven to be true based on the work that I've done, specifically with the historical knowledge part, because for many of them, it was like I started working here when I was 18 or 19 years old, and I've just moved up the ranks, and I have been here for the entirety of my career, and I'm going to be here until I retire. I've been supervised by Gen X. I kind of call them like the big brothers and sisters and aunts of the workplace because those are the folks who have kind of been here long enough to see a lot of the change. They're very much solution-oriented people. So if there's a problem, their biggest thing is going to be to fix it. In my experience, not to say that they don't necessarily care about feelings, but they're more looking at the process and how you handle things and how we go from A plus B to C equals D, and not necessarily about the shades of gray in between those things. And then Gen Z, those are up and coming folks. So for many of us, those are our RAs, our desk workers. For some of us, those are our ACDs. So our folks who are in the halls at the graduate level. And for some of those positions, some of them are full-time professional staff as well, depending on where they fall in the Gen Z mix. I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed about supervising that generation of folks is their idea or thought that they can multitask a lot. I'm sorry, my on-call phone is ringing. Hold on one second. Sorry, fire alarm. We had a building dump. My apologies. So those Gen Z folks are big on multitasking. They have this idea that they can do everything, but I don't necessarily know that the concept of doing everything well is something that permeates. And it's this idea or this thought that like, I'll just get all of the things done, which is not a bad thing. There's just a way around managing that type of energy so that things can be done in a way that is effective. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? I don't think I see anything. Um, okay, I do see things in the chat, but not anything. Fabulous. So in the Stanford University study, they mentioned these 8 kind of values or things when it comes to, based on their research, how folks interact with, how Gen Z interacts with our workplace. So because they came into our workplace for a lot of them during COVID, around the COVID-19 time, they are used and accustomed to things changing very frequently. Not to say that they necessarily can keep up with the change, not to say that they hate or like the change, but they are accustomed to change constantly happening, which then leads them to be very pragmatic. They have an understanding of the things they need to do. They have the understanding that those things need to get done, and they get them done. I think one of the kind of bad raps that Gen Z gets is like they don't want to work. And I don't think that's the case. I just think their understanding of what work means in the kind of on the flip side of what the work culture has been throughout the years just looks very different. Like for a lot of the Gen Z folks that I supervise, they think that just because they're in red, not even just because they're in red life, but the idea or thought is, well, why can't my job be a work from home job? And for folks like me as a millennial, or even our baby boomers or Gen X who came into this field at a different time, the expectation is that you have to be in your office to serve students, because if a student comes to look for you and you're not in your office, then you can't serve them. Again, not a good or bad thing. It is just kind of the standard practice that we have had in this field. And we can get into the debates about how people have feelings and thoughts about those things, but that's kind of what the culture of higher education has always been and or require. Our Gen Z staff really have a strong desire to make a difference. They will see a thing and notice that this thing has a better way to do it, and they will want to provide a solution or a different way around it. Again, not a bad thing, but as a supervisor and a manager, it is important that we learn how to understand and work with that energy, because I think one of the things that happens, and I've seen happen as a new supervisor, is our new folks will come in, and this is not generation specific, this is just in general. New folks will come in, they'll have this very strong desire, they see all these things, they want to change all these things, but they may not necessarily have the historical knowledge or the political capital across campus to be able to make those changes. So then how do you as a supervisor look to channel some of that good energy and those ideas and those things into what makes it then a sustainable and effective, initiative, opportunity, project, etc. They value teamwork. Again, I think one of the things with them coming into our workplaces is they've always had a sense of community around them, despite kind of COVID-19 and the isolation. But even in those small pockets, when those things were going on, folks still had those little nucleus of people that they would hang around and be with and spend time with. So they do enjoy working in a team atmosphere. I think one of the downsides, or not the downside, but one of the challenges is everyone on the team doesn't always do equitable work. So that's what then makes it challenging, because folks might feel like, well, I'm doing this much and so is doing this much, but so is not doing as much work as I am. So how is this fair? And I think that is a very high value and a good conversation to have around fairness, but it also is more about explaining what it means to be equitable as opposed to fair. Gen Z value transparent leadership. For many of us, I think we think of transparency as, well, you have to tell everyone everything. And it's not necessarily telling everyone everything, but more so explaining the why behind why the things are being done. I think in residence life as a whole, we have always functioned under these systems that folks are just supposed to know the things that they're supposed to do, and they're supposed to get them done, which is great, but that is not always the case for all the people involved. And I think as our field and industry looks to adapt, and we start to recruit different kinds of folks with different backgrounds that are not always residence life specific, so think your MBAs and your counselors and things like that, there has to be a level of more thorough explanation around things. Like one of the things that I will oftentimes say to my staff when they come to tell me something is, talk to me like I'm 5. because you have this idea in your head where you're saying all of these things. I'm not in your head, so I don't understand it. So I need you to take a deep breath and then explain it to me piece by piece as though you were talking to someone in kindergarten. Not because I don't get it, not because I'm not intelligent, not because they're intelligent, but in order for us to be clear in our communication, we need to make sure that we are covering all of the bases, speaking slowly, and offering opportunities for feedback to ask questions and things like that so that we can ensure that all people are on the same page. Another thing, and this actually came up today, mental health and work-life balance. One of the things, again, our field does not usually function well in this arena when it comes to supporting staff and having better work-life integration and things like that. But one of the things I'm very big about telling my staff is your boundaries are your boundaries. And you can be as flexible with those boundaries or as hard with those boundaries as you want. But y'all understand that if I'm off from work and I'm telling you that I'm off from work, I don't expect to hear from you about work. If you want to text me and ask me about a cool restaurant I went to had lunch the other day, cool. But if you are off, comp day, sick day, vacation day, whatever, I don't expect you to be messaging me on Teams to ask me a question about something that is at work because you should be off. Because I think one of the things that becomes a double-edged sword, especially with our new entry-level staff and employees, is a lot of folks feel like if somebody sends me a response, somebody sends me a question, I have to answer it right now. And yes, for some things, they are time sensitive and that conversation needs to happen right now. But the reality of it is if you as the staff person make it a choice every single time somebody says something to message you and you respond, you are training folks to believe that you are always available. And that is not the case. And some of the time when we start having the conversation about mental health and burnout and quiet quitting and all of those things, a lot of those things become issues because of our own making, right? Like if I'm on vacation, I might go through and check my email and see if there's anything that's like trash to get rid of. So I'm not coming back to work with 100 emails, but unless it is absolutely critical and time sensitive and needs to be responded today, it can wait. And I think in this essence to want to do a good job, we are quickly to respond to everything. And sometimes it doesn't really need to be responded to in real time. Now, there are those very, and I say this because this is residence life, there are those few cases of what I like to call fire, flood, blood, death that like need to be responded to right now today in real time. But a student staff member sending you a text about what day they were on call, that is not something you need to respond to today. They could check the on-call schedule, talk to their suite mates or talk to their teammates or go on the Teams group or whatever method it is for communication and figure it out. You do not have to answer that right then and there. Because I think, again, another part of this is as the supervisors of these folks, and this goes for student staff and professional staff, the way that we coach and train and respond to them is what helps them to develop these habits, whether they're good or bad, and then they lose the critical thinking skill that it takes to be able to respond to things. It's one thing if you're the person on call and they're calling you because they're dealing with an incident and they need help. It's another thing for them to be calling you to say they can't find UPD's phone number. You should not be calling me for University Police Department phone number. It's on the website. It's in the phone. That's not a question you should be asking me. So I'm not going to respond to you. I see laughing coming up in the chat, but I'm not going to respond to you because I don't need to. This is something that you can figure out on your own. And I think part of that training piece becomes how do we develop and manage and have those conversations when it comes to leading, coaching, and managing our staff. And then there's different thoughts on loyalty. A lot of folks say Gen Z don't have loyalty. They'll leave a job in a heartbeat. And that's absolutely true. And I think it should be, because I do think in the system of higher education, particularly in this industry, folks have gone far too long going along to get along at the cost of their own expense. And then they're burnt out and they're frustrated and they're quiet quitting. And it's like, well, we all had an opportunity to do something about it a long time ago. And we made the choice. And I say we because I have been guilty of this in my career. Make the choice to stay and sit and endure and just, yeah, I'm doing it for the students. I'm doing it for the students. Nobody wants a martyr. Period. Mic drop. Boom. You staying here to endure bad treatment and all the things is not going to give you a gold star for your career. Honestly, it's going to make you hate the work that you thought you loved so much. So I always encourage folks that if you feel like you need an out, get you a mentor, start getting a program, figure out what it is that you need to do in order to be in a place where you're happy, because the industry of higher education only sustains because we are in it. If we, for some reason, up and decide that we're going to stop doing this work altogether, that the work will cease to exist. And we don't want that, because for many of us, and I even say this for myself personally, I am here because somebody at my small private white institution had a look at me and said, you can do something great with yourself. And that's how I got into this field, which is a story for most of us. We fall into it by accident. You do orientation, you become an RA, and then you find the work. But part of that finding the work means you're in an environment that is healthy and sustainable for you, whatever that looks like. And then they value trust as much as people say they don't value loyalty. They do want to work for someone who trusts that they can do the work. But I think part of that is providing the proper parameters around expectation for them to be able to be trusted. Is the training, schedule and manual up to par? Are they getting all the protocol things that they need to have on one hand? Are things being properly communicated to them? Again, I say that almost exclusively for student staff, but it does matter for professional staff and entry level staff as well, because I also think too often in this field, we live kind of by the trial by fire, where we just throw people into the furnace and hope that they come out alive after 10 months, and then wondering why come June we going through the whole job cycle again. And it's because they were never properly trained, they didn't feel supported, and now they're trying to figure out which way is up. But their livelihood is attached to this, because for many of us too, we also provide them with housing. And in this particular economy, with the things that we're dealing with, that is a basic need that a lot of people need to have and maintain, and they should not have to sacrifice their mental health in order to have that need met. And folks will always say, oh, there's other options, there's other things they can do. There are other things that they can do, but they want to do this. So how do we work with these systems and support folks so that folks can feel like this is going to be, I say profitable, but not in a money way, but like it is sustainable and it is good for them to be able to do the things that they need to do and manage the pieces that they need to manage around their own lives to continue to be good professionals for us in this field. So leadership. One of the things that I always tell my staff, particularly my entry-level professional staff, as they supervise their student staff, is leadership comes in two forms. It comes in a transactional form and it comes in a transformational form. And for many of us, we spend a lot of time supervising our folks in a way that is transactional, and we forget sometimes that there are parts of this that are transformational. And I do think the idea or the thought that when we focus on the transactional piece, it is really truly about them doing the job. And that is what they are paid to do. They signed a contract, they have agreed, they will serve on call, they will do programs, they will support the students and all of those things. But I think there are times that we miss the transformational piece about how they grow and they develop and how they support students, and how that retention helps with how we run our departments. And again, that's not just student staff, that's also professional staff. Because I think any supervisor can learn and always grow and develop what it means to supervise people, because the plus side and downside of these jobs is we have pretty consistent turnover. So you're always going to be supervising different kinds of people in different degrees of their kind of spectrum of understanding around workplace norms and things like that. So there's always an opportunity for growth. So I like to always remind people that when you look at how you lead, leadership has two different portions. There's the transactional piece that requires you to, set expectations with your staff members. Those are the ones that require you to do the evaluations. Those are the ones where you have the discussions around how they support the student staff, show up for meetings on time, document students and staff when they don't follow directives, because I think that's one of the things that gets missed far too often in our field. We spend a lot of time doing the fun and fuzzy stuff where we develop them and we grow them, and it's all the transformational pieces, and we forget the transactional pieces of the importance of meeting deadlines, the importance of things for being on time. Simple things like why you need to wear your polo at the desk, because if UPD shows up to respond to an incident, they're not going to know you as a student staff member from a regular student who's in the residence hall. And while those are kind of small things that I don't think we necessarily stress as much, those are the things that become vital to the program, because if there's an incident where something is happening, heaven forbid the university president or the vice president of student affairs or the dean of students has to show up, they need to be able to look and say, this is the student staff member for residence life, this is the professional staff member for this is residence life, this is the university police officer, and these are the people who showed up to respond to whatever incident is. So that's just an example. So I do this talk with all of my entry-level staff coming in when it comes to supervising their staff. They have three main points in the supervision kind of spectrum. They manage, they coach, and then they supervise. Managing is very much project-based. How do you delegate things? How do you provide those feedbacks? And that's where you have the opportunity to develop. I say that happens over time when you think more of like the year-long period where it's like you're planning those large programs or you're working with them around their graduation plans and what they hope to do with their skills and things like that. But some of those times, and I think this happens far too often with entry-level staff, some of those small things on the day-to-day, like you need to check a room to see if a student is present, you need to check a room key, that doesn't necessarily have to be you every time. If you use a Teams group or a group me or something, hey, is somebody available to go check on room 425 and check this key for me? Because somebody run upstairs and do it right quick. 9 times out of 10, somebody's in the building and they're more than happy to help because they're not doing anything. But as a supervisor, you have to figure out how you can delegate those small tasks off your desk to be able to free up time for the bigger things you have to do. Now, if you have a bulk of like 10 rooms you have to check on, then yeah, you probably should do it. But if it's just a one-off thing that you can get somebody else to do it for you, I would definitely say work on your skills and delegation. Another thing is coaching. That's specific to goal setting, developing their skills and competencies, helping them work through challenges, developing problem solving, and that happens in real time. So I think about those times when they're on call and they'll call and ask you a seemingly, minute question. And then the question for me is always, did you read the manual? If you read the manual, what did it say? I've had professional staff have to read me back the manual because they're calling to ask me a question of something that's already in the manual that they didn't necessarily need to call me to figure out because it's already in the manual. And that's not to be funny. It's not to be rude, but sometimes folks just need to be reminded that they already had the information and they just may have forgotten. Because again, one of those things in residence life is we are constantly dealing with things and putting out fires and moving things around all over the place that we just forget, and it's normal. But I think from the coaching piece of there too is a lot of how am I getting you prepared for whatever the thing is that's next for you in the job, right? And it's not necessarily the RA job because there are plenty of people who are RAs or community advisors or whatever your school calls them in college, or even complex directors, hall directors, who in the next job are not in this role. They leave the industry completely. They're not in residence life. Some of them don't stay in higher education. But how are we developing those skills for you to be able to problem solve and critically think and do all of the things in any job that you go in that's not necessarily related to this job? Excuse me. And then supervising. Supervising is a big one because that is when you look at those kind of case by case basis and one-on-ones. It relates directly to the job description. So one of the things when it comes to my staff and supervising my staff, I make it explicitly clear to both my student staff and my professional staff. At the beginning of the year, you are given a job description. You sign this contract and you say that these are the things that you are going to do for the duration that you are employed with us. I make that explicitly clear. Read it. Because if you come back to me and you ask me a question, I'm literally going to respond to the question with where it is in the contract. And sometimes I get funny and I highlight it and give you your signed contract back and say, this is where you signed and said that you were going to be on call from this day and this time or whatever the case is. And I like to make that clear to folks because one of the things, particularly for my entry-level staff when they're supervising student staff, is this thought or idea that this student has had so many violations to this process that now I want to terminate them. And then my response is going to be, where is your human resources file? Where is the prior documentations that they had? Where are the prior conversations that they had? Because if you don't outline all those things for me, I cannot give you grounds to terminate the student or the person. But I think in part of that supervising, how are you also in having those conversations? Because the biggest thing for me around the documentation piece is, yes, you're going to get a letter, but we're also going to have a conversation so that I can provide you some guidance and support on how to not do this. Like, it's one thing if you're just late for a staff meeting, right? Not to say just, you're going to be documented for that. But let's have a conversation about why you were late. Did you forget to set an alarm? Were you coming from class? At what point did you know you were going to be late? That you had the opportunity to communicate to me that you were going to be late? Because the other thing is now you being late as a staff member has delayed our ability to start this meeting so that we could be on time, so that we could finish on time, because we all have other things to do outside of this staff meeting. So I think it is also about constantly and consistently having those conversations around areas for growth so that the student staff or the professional staff member has the opportunity to I don't want to say exhibit, but they have the opportunity to kind of show their stuff and show you that they have taken what you said and then be able to have the conversation or change the behavior so that we stop having those challenges. And then supervising it's time limited. So it goes kind of month to month or semester to semester. depending on your institutional system or if the student staff or professional staff is returning. Because like in my current role, we have a lot of like temp 1 year appointments, so they'll only be here for 10 months. So I try to make sure that in the supervision process, they're getting some level of growth there. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? Okay, not seeing anything. So considerations. One of the things is degree completion. Are these students undergraduate, master's students, or doctorate students? Because I think another piece of, particularly in this residence life position, a lot of students are only here for a duration of time, whether that's undergraduate or master's students, or even some professional staff members who are on doctorate degrees. So they might just be digging their feet into the ground as like, I'm just going to do this for 2 years, and when I'm done, I'm done. Or I'm just going to do this for a year, and when I'm done, I'm done. But those things sometimes have an impact depending on what their tuition plans look like. I'm currently in New York State, so we have something called the TAP scholarship. So if a student receives the TAP scholarship, they're basically at school tuition free. So then many of them sign up to be RAs so that their housing is covered. So then really all they worried about is paying student fees. But if for some reason they lose the student staff position, they then will be responsible for housing. So we do keep that in mind as we continue to have conversations with students, specifically around accountability, which is the next point, and job expectations. We will document students as much as we need to based on their violations of the contract, but we do keep in mind that for some of our students, they won't be able to be at this school without the job. And we stress that and have that conversation in all of the accountability conversations. Like, just understand that after so many more documentations, there's a possibility that you're going to be in danger of being terminated from this role. So I want you to understand that that is something that can have an impact on your tuition and your bill, et cetera, et cetera. I am big about taking the strengths-based approach. So specifically when it comes to supervising professional staff, I ensure that any additional project I'm asking them to do is something that's going to fill their cup up. Like I currently have 2 professional staff members now that love to program. So their kind of auxiliary assignment is working with our health and wellness initiative to ensure that monthly programs are happening in the hall every month around health and wellness. We just had the counselors in the halls yesterday for an hour, kind of giving out stickers, talking about suicide awareness and things like that. So it is really important that if they are, I say, getting additional tasks, and it's not necessarily additional because it's part of the job description, but I try to divide and conquer so that folks are also involved in things that make them happy. Like I have a staff member who's currently in his MBA program. He's really passionate about human resources, got a SHRM certification. So he runs the student staff hiring process. And I'm talking evaluating applications, developing rubrics, setting schedules, planning interviews, like that's his bread and butter, and he loves to do that. So he will make time to do that and manage that process in addition to doing his regular job, because it's the experience he wants, but also because it's the things he enjoys. And for me as a supervisor, I get to delegate something off my plate so that I have made time and space to work on other things. Professional development, always important. Many of our institutions, mine included, we're in a lot of budgetary constraints. So things like the Akuai Best of Showcase is a great opportunity to give folks time to take an hour out of the day to do some professional development that they don't have to pay for. But I would encourage you, for those who supervise professional staff, reach out to your institutions, particularly your human resources office. They usually have like a professional development person or people that can come into your area and your department and do some things around webinars and ongoing development. My previous institution, the University of North Texas, they actually had a program called the Supervisor Building Blocks. So anyone who supervised a professional staff had to go through like these like set of courses around like progressive discipline and like multi-generational workplace, like all of these things. I think you had to do 7 out of 10 or something like that, but you had to go to so many sessions in order for your professional development. And then you would get like a certificate that says you've completed the program. But again, I encourage folks, I know all of our institutions are strapped, so you might not necessarily get to go to the ACPAs and the COOIs, but there are plenty of regional things. There are plenty of statewide things. There are local things that can be affordable or free or low cost. So as a supervisor, as much of those opportunities that you can provide to your staff, and I say provide not in the idea of like you need to go to this, but like, hey, here's an opportunity, look into it if you're interested, we can talk about it. Because again, for many of our specific entry-level staff and grad level staff, they don't know what they don't know. They haven't really had an opportunity to interact with our systems because this is for a lot of them, their first time or first job doing this kind of work. So it's important that we continue to have ongoing development for those folks. And then recognition. Again, I say this because a lot of our institutions are strapped. Gone are the days of the big banquet where everybody gets an award and we have to do the fun stuff. But I don't think folks realize how long a thank you, you're doing a good job goes. And whenever my staff does things that I feel like, and I'm not even going to say that I feel like, I recognize when they do things that are great. So, for example, right now we have a programming week that we call Cookies and Conversations, which is solely around what we call the C's of college. So, conduct, consent, community, and something else. I can't remember what the fourth C is. But I literally just gave them a small document. I was like, here's the stuff you need to cover. Do what you will with that information. I have one complex that's doing like a passport system where it's going to be like a zoo and they go to every building. Then I have another one that's doing like a carnival style. So, like, they had the opportunity to really expand their creativity and their programming around it, because for me it was just that this is the information the students need to have, you need to figure out how that works. And I had to tell them, like, I'm blown away by your proposals, I'm very proud of the work that you did, but then I also went and told my supervisor and our supervisor, the dean of students, so she's going to come to the programs and be able to see how how our staff and students really get to engage with our residents on campus. So I just think small things like that, just being able to tell folks you did a good job. I recognize this is fantastic. I'm proud of the work that you're doing, because I don't think we hear that enough. And then long-term goal setting. Again, most of the people who are in residence life do not plan to make a career out of this. I say all the time, I'm one of the few kind of crazy people that stuck with the job and in this role, because I can't imagine myself doing another thing. But also, I tell all of my staff, my goal is to give you the things for what you want to do next, whatever that looks like. And recognizing you may not know. So maybe it is, you were at a Google school and now you're at a team school and you need some help with teams, or like, our institution is big on Excel spreadsheets. So teaching them how to filter spreadsheets, how to develop spreadsheets, like all of those things are important. So how do I ensure that it might not be something you love to do, like assessment, but you're getting some level of assessment by reading through the reports that were submitted and quantifying some of those responses? Because then I have to come back and read that assessment and quantify those responses. So how do I make sure that I'm supporting you in developing those skills? Because again, you may not be in residence life in a year from now, but knowing how to do assessment is a skill that you need for the rest of your life. So strategies. Yes, changing from Googles to Teams has been rough because we were going through the same thing. So thank you, Sasha, for that comment. I figured out how to get the chat. So if y'all want to chat, let me know. So here are my 6 strategies, kind of how I manage and lead through this staff. So I lead by example. They will follow your actions before your words. So like my staff knows one of my boundaries is I do my best to leave work at 5 o'clock. Sometimes I work until 6, but if I am not the person on call, you should not be asking me any questions beyond 5:30. Love you, Mina, don't ask me. And if you text me or send me a Teams message after 5:30 or before 8:30, you're not getting a response. And I am, part of that is because I'm in school too, so I have to do other things with my time. But I try to do my best to make it clear to them that if you start to respond to messages after 5 o'clock, students will always think that they can message you after 5 o'clock. And that makes it hard for you to have any kind of time to yourself. The second piece is clear communication. Write everything down as much as you can. This year, I'm not going to say I instituted, but I encouraged my professional staff to get a notebook that they take to meetings and physically take notes. And they kind of all looked at me crazy. And it's week 3, and they have notebooks full of things. Come into one-on-ones, got agenda of things written down they have questions about, making notes for the things. 2 of the CDs have created a kind of like RA checklist form that they fill out for all of their one-on-ones. But write down as much as you can, if that's following up with the email, if that's communicating on Teams, because the amount of time my staff will come to me and say they requested a day off, and I'm asking them where they requested it, and they're like, oh, it's on Teams, and I'll go back and look. 2 weeks ago, you did say you were going to be off today. Let me go ahead and update the calendar. Because again, in residence life, we have so many things happening so fast that literally I don't remember what my supervisor told me in a staff meeting this morning, because we now have already had a fire, we had a wellness check, and my phone died. And we just had that meeting at 10 o'clock. I didn't really have lunch till 1:30. So write down as much as you can and just make it a habit. Another thing that I've done this year too is I have blocked all of my professional staff calendar from 9 to 10, and I call it the housekeeping hour. So when they come in, they cannot schedule any meetings. Nobody can schedule any meetings, so that they can go over their Maxine report. They can go over their pro staff on-call logs. They could check any emails, follow up on anything from the night before, and they have all loved this housekeeping hour to be able to come in and look through things without being bothered. I did that when I was a complex director or hall director, but I self-imposed that. And I, as a supervisor, was just like, well, this is what worked for me. And it doesn't seem like y'all have any strategy. So we're going to try this out. And we tried it out for the first week of school, and we're now in week 3, and they love it. One of them, maybe last week, came in late one day for work, and she was like, I didn't realize how much that housekeeping hour like helped me, because I've been running behind all day, and I haven't really gotten to do anything that I needed to do because I came in at 10 this morning. So I'm not saying that that's a strategy for everyone, but it is a strategy that has worked for me. When I was specifically in the live-in role. It's a little bit different now as a mid-level, because like we have like our division leadership things and all that stuff that will happen at the top of the morning, but I still don't schedule meetings before 10 a.m. because I have to go through all my things before I can be talking to people and meeting with folks. So number 3, be approachable. Be clear about when you have capacity. Supervisees can and will pick up on your emotional state, and it will impact your work. Again, many of us are in these roles where our institutions, things are happening in real time, and we don't necessarily have the time to check our feelings before things happen. So sometimes it is, I need to go in my office, I need to close the door, I need to take a pause before anybody talks to me, because right now I have too much going on in my head and I don't want to have a conversation. I literally just said this to our dean of students. I was like, I cannot have this conversation right now, because if I have this conversation right now and the staff overhears me, it's not going to help our morale. So we can have another conversation. I'll schedule a meeting at a later time. And again, it's not bad or good. It's just one of those times where you just don't have the capacity to have it today. Or like my supervisor will say, like, I'm uncaffeinated right now, so let me get a coffee and I'll come back to you. But just make sure that you are as open as you can be in some spaces, knowing that you may not always have it all the time, and being able to communicate that with your team so they're not kind of in this hanging pattern of like, well, I want to have this conversation, but my supervisor doesn't look like they're having a good day, but we need to talk about this thing. So make sure that you're clear about that. Actively listen and respond, not listening to respond. This was one of the things that I had to learn as a CD, because I remember one of my RAs, his name was Steven. He came into his one-on-one and he was like, I feel like every time we add a one-on-one, you're on the computer. Oh, I have a question. Let me finish this thought and I'll come back to this question. He's like, every time we have a one-on-one, you're on the computer. And I say, you know what? You're right. So I've made it to a point now where during my one-on-one times, I turn away from my computer or turn my computer off in its entirety. Now that I supervise professional staff members, I go to their offices for all of our one-on-ones. I don't let them come to mine. Because even when we're in my office, the student staff and our professional staff are in the main office are still coming to talk to me when I'm here. So I could just completely remove myself from the office so that I can give them the dedicated time and attention they need for support. So the question that I have in the chat was, could you share what support you have to stay approachable? It is rough during these times, staying authentic and approachable. And I think the biggest support that I have is taking time off. And I'm going to say this, and it's an unpopular opinion, but your sick time doesn't pay out. And you don't have to tell anybody why you're sick. If you're just having a day today and you woke up on the side of the bed, wrong side of the bed, right side of the bed, whatever it is, whatever you need to do, don't come to work. That's the biggest thing that I can say. And I say this as someone who works in a very, very small office. I think my scheduling time off takes a little bit more nuance, if you will. So like we can't have a day where everybody is out at the same time. So like perfect example, this week, my dissertation proposal is due on Friday. So I was going to take Friday off to finish it. But my supervisor is already going to be out. So I said, you know what? I'll move my meetings around on Thursday so I can take Thursday off to write so that I can be on work to be here on Friday to support my team because my supervisor is going to be out. But making sure that you are taking the time that you can, because I think to the point in this question, staying authentic and approachable, you don't owe anybody authenticity. You owe these people your time because they pay you for a paycheck. If you don't want to do it today, you do not have to. That's it. That's all. Because what you don't want is to be coming into work and you're already not feeling it. And now you're dealing with people in a way that is not helpful. Because as much as we want to say choice words to people at our jobs, we can't because we need the jobs. So sometimes it's just best to not be there. So then you don't have to use those words when you don't want to deal with anything. And there is another comment in the chat. Mental health days are valid. They are. I personally like Tuesdays and Thursdays because usually Law and Order SVU is on TV those days. So then I just stay in bed and watch Law and Order all day long. But we all have things, right? For some of us, it is going for walks in the park. Some of it is going to the gym, yoga, all of those things. But I also am a firm believer that we can't just work ourselves to death 40 hours a week every week and only get off Saturday and Sunday. And like the one Labor Day, the one Indigenous Peoples Day, the one, fall break if you have it or whatever the case is. And some of those days we're still actually required to work. But those one-off times that we get is not enough. So if you need to stay home, stay home. Because after the first month, you have all this sick time anyway, and they're not going to pay it out. So use it. And also, if you go into the doctor's office or you got like another like counseling appointment, you can use your sick days for that time as well. You should not be begging to take time off when you need to go do things. Use your sick time. So number 5, encourage and empower. I mentioned this before. Uplift and support the good work that is being done often. As often as I can, I'm bragging about my team, the good things that they're doing. I'm telling folks on campus, I'm getting them connected. A lot of it about encouraging and empowering is really about the collaborative relationship you have across campus and how working with those offices basically make you look good. And I'm not to say that you have to do everything with everybody, but there are those cases and points where you want to work with folks, but you're afraid to reach out for whatever reason. So try to figure out how to support that good work. For many of you, depending on where your institution is located, you might already be a member of a regional organization, whether that's NASPA, ACPA, a Cool Y, or one of the regional affiliations of a Cool Y. Those are opportunities to get involved, again, that are low cost for the most part, and you can do webinars and things like that, but be able to share the work that you're doing so that even if you're not getting the support at your home institution, there are other people who are well connected to you that will be able to uplift you and do all of the things. And this is a strategy not for this, but just in general, get a mentor. Get several mentors. Get to a board of people that you can reach out and talk to, because a lot of the times, I think for many of us, we will be on campus and feel like we're the only one. And we'll be looking around and feeling like nobody else thinks this is nuts. Nope, just me. Okay, great. And sometimes you need to call somebody to say, this happened at work today. This doesn't make any sense. Am I the drama, or is this really the drama? And sometimes just having somebody to affirm that is important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be your supervisor, boss, or person that you work with. And then conflict management. Interpersonal work-related conflicts will happen. And it requires a level of expertise in mediation. Understanding that you may not get a resolve that everybody is happy with, but as long as folks can agree to be cordial, we will survive. And sometimes that conflict is you and conflict you have within yourself. Sometimes that's conflict you have with your supervisor, and you just, kind of defer to just saying okay and keeping it pushing. But conflict will happen. So it is important to figure out what your conflict management strategies look like, not just interpersonal conflicts, but just in general. Because again, in residence life, the ball's always turning, things are always moving. So you're almost always going to be dealing with something, whatever that is. So making sure you have strategies on how to manage not just your emotions, but your mental and all those things. So here's my advice. Do not take up people's emotions to the point that it disables your ability to lead. Many of us got into this field because we want to help people. We can't help everybody. And sometimes it is, you know what, today I don't have it. I can't really do anything with this. So I'm going to defer this to someone else. That might mean you need to pass it off. That might mean you need to talk to your supervisor. That might mean you need to, if you're in a union, you might need to go to your union rep, but it just looks different for different people. But don't start to feel like I'm an empath. So don't start to feel like you have to kind of inhale all these emotions and then you don't have anywhere to put it. So now you can't do anything with it, the emotions or yourself for that matter. Give yourself grace to fix one issue at a time. This is residence life. Something is literally always going to need a Band-Aid every single day. You're going to come in, open your email. Somebody, parent called to need a wellness check. Student staff member got upset last night and said a cuss word at the resident. The president is looking for you because somebody's mom called because their fridge broke. It's literally always going to be something. Give yourself grace to fix one issue at a time. Also know when the workday is done, the work will be there tomorrow. You're never going to get all the work done every day. Make your to-do list. If you get through 4 out of 6, great. If you get through 1 out of 6, just as fine as if you got through 4 out of 6. Give yourself grace to fix one thing at a time. Balance, whatever that looks like for you. When I go on vacation, I take my Outlook off my phone. That doesn't work for everybody, but whatever balance looks like for you. I would also say plan these vacations. Now, granted, when I was a live-in staff member, I didn't necessarily have money for planned vacations, but I did have time. So what I do, staycation at home. Go to the grocery store, buy all my favorite things, and sit myself at the home for 3 days. And get up and sleep and roll around in that bed like a rotisserie chicken. Because rest is important. And I value rest way too much. So figure out what balance looks like for you. Alter your supervision based on their level of need. For folks who supervise live-in student staff, you know you got those RAs who literally just gonna come to work, sit at the desk, and they're gonna go home. They're gonna give you the bare minimum. But then you have those other ones who want to come in, they want to do these programs, they want to collaborate, they want things coming out the wall and popcorn machines and cotton candy and carnivals. Supervise how you can, who you can, based on what they need. Know where to meet people where they are and know when to draw back. Again, we got in this field because we're touchy-feely, helpy people. We want to help everybody. Everybody does not want to be helped. And some of them will tell you, I don't care. I'm just here so I don't get fined. Okay, let's work with that. Here are the things you need to take care of so you don't get fined. If we have to have this conversation again, we'll be having a different conversation. Have a good day. I mentioned this before. I'll continue to mention this again. Boundaries, 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 1,000 times boundaries. And it is hard in this field, particularly as an entry-level staff member or a student staff member, to have boundaries. So figure out what that looks like for you. And again, you'll be flexible on them, right? Because this is residence life. Part of our whole job is around adaptability. But if you know today is Friday and Friday you will get your nails done and you don't want to talk to anybody when you get your nails done, don't talk to anybody when you get your nails done. Respond to them when you're finished or the next day or whatever the case is. But whatever your routine looks like, make sure you are prioritizing yourself first and foremost. And then my last piece of advice is be prepared to teach and reteach. Again, things are happening 30,000 times at 50,000 minutes, a moment, a minute. Folks are not going to remember every single thing you tell them. Now, it'll get to a point where you'll tell them the same thing multiple times. And then it's like, okay, are you really listening? Do I need a guide? How do we adjust this conversation so that I don't have to keep telling you these same things? But like I tell my staff all the time, explain it to me like I'm 5. If I still don't get it, then we have another conversation. But one of the things I've had to recognize in this role is I not constantly, but consistently have to start things over when introducing ideas to my staff because they slept since yesterday. They don't remember. And heaven forbid they've been on call today and the phone been ringing all night. They definitely don't remember what we talked about in the staff meeting yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So just be prepared to kind of repeat yourself more often than not. And I think we have roughly 5 minutes left. So if anybody has questions, put them in the chat. Not sure if folks can unmute. And then here's my contact information if anyone is looking for me anywhere, want to find me, want to talk to me, and stuff.
We do have one anonymous question that I can read and you can answer live. So I'll start us off. So this question is about balance between needing a mental health or personal day because you can't come in and when it starts to become a problem.
So that can go one of 2 ways. The first thing I will say is, what does your support look like when you are going through, say, a medical crisis, but like, are you going to a doctor's office regularly? Are you going to urgent care? Because those places will write you notes to say, you need to be off of work for X amount of time. And I know people, not in our industry, but in other industries, who will go to urgent care and just be like, I'm stressed out, I need 2 days, and urgent care will write them a letter. So that's part of the balance, but also job protection. But the other thing too is, again, back to kind of that medical support, you have FMLA. So if you really are in a point where mentally you cannot handle it or you're not sure that you can handle it, go to your doctor. Your doctor will do the necessary assessment to say you need FMLA or you need an accommodation of some kind. I've had staff that are like, I have to go to the counselor every day, so I have an accommodation to leave work at 3 o'clock every day. No problem. Because if at that point an institution is now saying you can't, Now we're having a totally different conversation, and it's beyond accommodation. Now we're looking at some issues of like some serious like legal violations. But if you need to call out, call out. If you need to go home, go home. If you like, you should. Everyone hopefully is in an environment where they're working with a supervisor who has that understanding. And if that is not the case, then reach out to mentors who can help you navigate that. And for some of us, that just means you need to leave the job. And it just is what it is. And it sucks because a lot of us are in these roles for whether it's location reason, personal reasons, like the area you live in, like the students you work with, all the things, but you have to prioritize yourself. And I said at the beginning of the presentation, nobody needs to be a martyr. These institutions have been around for 100+ years. They're not going to all of a sudden close down because you stop working at it. And that's the biggest piece of support I can always offer. Put yourself first. Because if something happens to you, that job will be posted within 30 days. I can guarantee you they're not waiting. So prioritize yourself in all things. Any more questions? I thought I saw something pop up, but I'm not sure what this is.
Oh, there is another one. How to navigate a department or school culture that does not value work-life balance, especially with supervisors who work 24/7 and expect everyone else to do the same.
Is that expectation in your job description? Because I don't think it is. Not in your job description. If all else fails, you have a job description and you refer to that job description as such. My job description says I will have occasional late hours. My job description says I will be on call. My job description says, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest thing you can be is your own advocate. Because folks are not going to say, oh, well, you know, Tiffany worked till 10 p.m. last night so she could come in at 8 a.m. Because there's no way you're firing at all cylinders at 8 a.m. Especially when for many of us, the main purpose of our job is the safety and security of students. We have to be on. We have to be prepared. We have to be ready to respond because the nature of the work it is that we do. But just because my supervisors come in at 7 a.m. don't mean I'm coming in at 7 a.m. because I didn't go to bed till midnight last night. I don't have no reason to be here at 7 o'clock because the students also aren't looking for me at 7 a.m. They're probably not looking for me until closer to lunch, in which case I'll probably be in and around the union or the cafeteria or whatever, engaging with students in that way. The other thing I will say that I neglected to mention is make sure your calendar is up to date so that if your supervisor is quote unquote looking for you, they know where to find you. And when I was a hall director, I had friends that I worked with where on occasion we would like schedule a meeting with each other if we knew like one of us was going to be late so that we weren't like getting in trouble. Now, again, I'm not broadcasting that wildly for everybody to do, but there are different things you can do to work with the staff and folks that you work with so that you can feel supported in your day-to-day. So you don't have to follow anybody's expectation outside of the expectation in your job description. And sometimes you have to advocate for yourself and push back. And if you do feel like you're in a hostile situation, which I have been, I will go to human resources and file a report. You're not about to bully me because I'm wearing jeans at work when everybody else is wearing jeans. We arguing about pants, which is the whole title, Crocs or not, because I think there's a lot of other generational folks who feel a way about Crocs in the workplace, but that's not the argument I'm going to have with you. You have shoes, closed-toe shoes on. Just know that like if a toilet explodes and now you got to go clean up some mess, your socks are going to be wet, but that's a choice. Everybody makes a choice. But I'm not arguing with you about what you wear to work. That's not important. Are you on time for your meetings? Are you showed up prepared and ready to work? That's what I care about. I don't care if you're wearing Crocs or not. It has nothing to do with the price of tea in China.
So true. Well, I think that's all we have time for. If you have further questions, Tiffany's email is on the slide. Please join me in thanking her. This was a great presentation. This recording will be on YouTube by tomorrow, so share widely if you choose. And then our next festive showcase is from Oakuho. They're going to present on September 16th at 3 p.m. and it's called Breaking the Iceberg Gamification for Residence Life Engagement. And that registration is in the chat as well as the rest of the slate for the Best of Showcase. So come to some more sessions. Thank you all for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
Everyone, have a good day.